Greetings and welcome to Phantom's Edge. This will be Chapter 10 of this reading. Exactly 1,000 deaths, Bureau Captain Akamir said, who was a well-known dark brown furred Mustel otter that was very much a stuck-up to his colleagues and subordinates, yet a kiss-ass to his admiral superiors. Captains were fast walking to the bureaucracy headquarters from the docks to catch up with the other captains and Vice Admiral Edison for an important meeting, while Akamir explained to Gregory why the pirate, Captain Kaio, gained his infamous nickname. The two were just entering the massive white building as Akamir continued, "The bastard killed men, women, children, and even pregnant women with children that had loving men as their husbands." "Uh-huh," Gregory said, uncaring to have heard the last part. "He's insane, delusional, sadistic, and a vile being of life that must be rid from this world. In one night, he murdered 1,000 people within the Bureau using only 2 swords, with rumors of a higher count by a run-in with some other pirates." Akamir then quickly muttered, "Madman." Moving to stand before the double doors that led into the meeting hall, the Mustel looked over at the Kanai and said, "Do not screw this up, Gregory. I must present our findings in a fashionable manner to the admirals." He then turned towards the doors as he quickly fixed his attire to seem neat, while he continued, "So keep your snout closed tight, and for God's sakes, let me do the talking." Gregory smiled, thinking nothing but bad thoughts about the Mustel being killed in some dishonoring way, like fighting the dual-edged demon, while he said, "Yes, sir, as you wish, sir." Right. Captains stepped forwards, with only Akamir opening the doors by pushing them in as they entered the room. While letting the doors swing to close behind them, Akamir raised his hands up slightly and said, "Morning, gents. Sorry that I kept you waiting." "Actually," Jacqueline corrected, "we've been waiting on Vice Admiral Edison for about 10 minutes now. He hasn't shown up yet." Akamir lowered his arms, while Gregory went to sit in one of the chairs circling the center of the room. Then the Mustel said, "Really? Well, let's not waste any time getting to know each other's situations. You know we can't do that if a superior was the one who called for our presence. Along with that, the Vice Admiral told us that the other admirals were coming for this discussion as well, including Fleet Admiral Pre. So if it's that important, we should keep our information to ourselves till they arrive." The Mustel glanced over at the female Kanai and quietly said, "Smart-ass mutt." Having heard the insulting phrase, Gregory stood up and turned to his disgraceful colleague with great anger as he yelled, "Shut your jaws, weasel, before I pound them shut." Everyone glanced over at the male Kanai, confused, while the Mustel tried to act nonchalant as he motioned to get a drink from the table. At the same time, Akamir calmly said, "I'll just get a cup of tea now." Everything was tense for a while, with the room being completely silent as both captains sat down, each at opposite ends of the circle. After a few minutes, Josephina walked in holding a letter. She motioned towards the group of soldiers, where she raised the letter slightly to look down at it and began reading out loud. "To all who have gathered for this meeting," the Hume said, "you are hereby excused by order of Fleet Admiral Pre of the Bureaucracy Army. Meeting is to be rescheduled in 3 days. All lieutenant commanders to ensigns must report to the docks for ship maintenance. Warrant officer ranks and lower will patrol the city streets, informing their superiors of any suspicious activities when needed. Captains may wander city limits with an escort of their commanders, but are required to stay within headquarters till further notice." As everyone went to their duties, Josephina motioned to Gregory and placed her left hand on his right shoulder. Doing so, she kept him from getting out of the seat, while she quietly said, "Stay here, Captain." Once everyone else had left, Josephina motioned for the Kanai to follow her. She led him to her home, taking hidden and unmarked roads through the city to keep out of sight of either other Bureau soldiers or pirates. At the mansion, Josephina locked the front door, then pulled Gregory upstairs and into her bedroom. She had the captain sit on the side of her bed, while she stood a few feet away in front of him with her hands placed in front of her. After a moment of silence, Josephina joyfully lunged for the Kenai as she said, "Oh, my poor little puppy wuppy fuzzyisms." The Hume slammed the back of the captain's head onto the wall, but was unaware of it as she went to rub her head against his chest and continued, "Daddy told me everything. How those mean and nasty hares ignored your offer, how they carelessly broke the offering sword, and how they threatened you." Well, technically it wasn't upon my life, so it wasn't an actual threat. "Nonsense!" Josephina shoved the man to lie across her bed, while she braced herself over him and moved to be eye to eye and said, "Any threat, big or small, calls grounds for war against the bureaucracy. You should know that, Greggy." She then lowered herself to lie on top of the captain as she continued, "And I know if you go out there, you'll beat those mean rabbits and bring them to justice." Josephina went to rub her head on the captain's chest again, while she said, "Ah, seeing you fight for our love is a wondrous thing. It makes me so happy." Damn it, Gregory thought. She won't let me move. Why is she... Just then, the captain realized something about the house, noticing that when he arrived that neither Cornelius nor Teresa were around. The two were alone. Once he figured that, Gregory said, "Oh no." Josephina giggled as she moved to kiss the Kenai, then looked him straight in the eyes and said, "I have you all to myself now, honey." Waiting at the docks, Marilyn and Lieutenant Stewart, an all-black feathered avifaun peregrine falcon, watched as the other captains went to report on their ship's crew members. However, they found that Captain Gregory had not yet returned from headquarters. As the other captains left with their commanders to wait in their quarters among the main office, Stewart looked over at the lieutenant commander, confused, and asked, "Where's the captain? Shouldn't he have been here by now?" Marilyn glanced over at the avifaun and replied, "Should, but he might be speaking with Captain Jacqueline." Stewart looked around for a moment, then noticed the Kenai mentioned, and said, "But she's with Commander James right now." Marilyn glanced over at where the captain was, then looked back towards headquarters and said, "And that means Gregory's in trouble." "Trouble? Shouldn't we go help him?" Marilyn responded with a sigh, then said, "Unfortunately, at this point, we'd just be better off staying here till he can get a break. No point getting our gooses cooked trying to supposedly save him." Stewart glanced down at the deck for a moment as his stomach rumbled. Then he looked back up at the lieutenant commander and said, "I'm hungry for goose now." Jacqueline and her commander, James, followed by Lieutenant Rita, a female white-tailed cervi, went to wander the city streets without any care of where they were going. The captain, calmly moving through the crowds, wondered about what to do with either Kyle or Gregory with how they were acting. She moved aimlessly for about 5 minutes, confusing her subordinates, then stopped at Phantom's Edge. Kenai stared out at the ocean as the gentle breeze swayed her soft, light fur, while listening to the sounds of the crashing waves below. She stood still with her arms behind her back, James to her back right, and Rita to her back left. After a few minutes, Rita broke the silence and said, "Captain, shouldn't you be waiting at headquarters? If the situation's this bad, it would be best if you weren't exposed to the dangers. Plus, I need to tend to your ship for maintenance." "Piracy is increasing in the world, you two," Jacqueline responded. "Danger is always on the rise, and our lives are at stake 24/7. It doesn't matter where you are, or what you do, or who you may know. Danger has its way to get to you. However, I will not let the dangers of the world control me with fear. I control danger with fear itself." "Captain," James called out, "though I honor your bravery and might, mentally, physically, and spiritually, I must ask that you return to headquarters. We shall discuss things later." "James, don't you get it? The admirals are in fear of the pirates." Jacqueline then turned to look over to her right at her commander, and continued, "That fear then runs through the rest of the bureaucracy like a virus, infecting anyone that overly idolizes their superiors. but I won't let it get to me. Jacqueline completely turned to face her subordinates and said, "We are the new law for this world. Whatever stands in our way will be dealt with both quickly and appropriately, without any hesitation." She glanced down for a moment, then moved to stare back out over the sea as she said, "Besides, that's not why I'm out here. I just needed some time to think. Maybe being the only brave one just might bring me to another life." A few more minutes passed, then the subordinates surprised their captain with something Jacqueline thought she had kept secret. The two glanced around to check and make sure no one else was around, then they looked back at their captain as James asked, "You're thinking about Kaio again, aren't you?" Jacqueline quickly looked over at the commander, shocked by his words, while the Felina continued, "It's okay, Captain. We won't say a word." "We've seen him every so often," Rita said, "either following around for a while or watching you from afar as you patrolled areas." Jacqueline lowered her arms as she curled her hands into fists, turning to her subordinates once more, and barked, "How long have you two known? Does anyone else know?" "No, Captain," James replied. "No one but us know. We found out about a year ago, having accidentally read one of your letters." Rita looked around again for a moment, keeping her attention to any who might stroll by as she turned back to her captain and said, "We didn't mean to, but it just came to our attention one day while you were beneath the deck. We wanted to speak with you, not realizing where you were at the time, and went into your ship's quarters. There, the wind from the open door blew off a piece of paper from your desk, and we went to put it back, thinking it was important. That's how we found out about him." Jacqueline started to hyperventilate, terrifyingly surprised from someone knowing of her secret messages from the pirate. James noticed this and reacted to the captain by motioning himself closer, holding the kunai in both arms to keep her from falling back. Rita turned away as she watched out for anyone that might come by, with James gently lowering his captain and motioning both onto their knees as he said, "I've got you, Captain. It's okay." Jacqueline placed her right hand on her chest over her heart, starting to cry as she said, "Why? You weren't supposed to know. No one was to know." "Jacqueline, please. It's okay. There's nothing against you." The captain looked up at her commander, painfully shedding tears as she barked, "Don't you understand, James? If the Bureau knows of that letter, they will have my head. All I've worked for will be in vain." "The bureaucracy doesn't know a thing, Captain." Jacqueline began to settle down as she tried to take in deep breaths while staring at the ground as James continued, "We made sure to burn the letter and toss the ashes out at sea once we saw it, keeping anyone else from reading it. Rita and I believe you have done nothing wrong. Your love, as anyone else's, is a personal thing that no other should intervene with." Jacqueline glanced up at James, then over to Rita as the Servile said, "We'll ignore that Kaio's a pirate if at any time we see him around you. There's nothing to report about knowing of a nice couple being in love." When she calmed herself, Jacqueline glanced between her subordinates and asked, You two would risk yourselves for me?" James smiled as he said, "Of course. Besides, there's no one I can imagine as a better leader of our crew than you, Jacqueline. If you left, I'd probably just get fired for insubordination with any other captain, and who knows what would happen to Rita." He then motioned for the two of them to stand as he said, "Now get up, Captain." James held onto Jacqueline's left arm as he and Rita escorted their superior away from the ledge, while the Felina continued, "Best to stay inside for now. Your disappearance from the Bureau will only cause suspicion." The commander removed himself from his captain as the group went to enter the population, having the kunai acting perfectly normal by the time anyone saw her. The sun was setting when they reached the bureaucracy headquarters, where the three quietly retreated to a private room for the captain to rest in. James agreed to watch the place between hourly shifts with Rita, patrolling the room silently to make sure no one was to barge in and cause a disturbance for any reason. Captain and lieutenant slept soundly together in the bedroom, Rita on a couch she moved from the living area to have next to Jacqueline's bed. James was on his second shift, having already checked each room to make sure nothing had changed when he heard the front door lightly creak open. Felina quickly reached for his sidearm pistol with his right hand and aimed it up at whoever it was to enter the living area. To his surprise, it was Captain Gregory, who was hardly shocked to see the gun pointed at him by another soldier of the bureaucracy. This concludes the reading of Chapter 10. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you've liked what you've seen and heard, be sure to check out my other two novels, Lore of the Endowment and Ryu the Demon Slayer. Link will be in the description below. Other than that, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you again next week reading Chapter 11.